to Season 5 of the Hey Girl podcast with your host and my mom, Bethany Needham. This season, we get to hear from some incredible new guests, and we're bringing back some of our faves. Each guest will share their story of running their race in their place, and we hope they inspire you to do the same. If you want more information or to connect with my mom, go follow our new Instagram at HeyGirlGram, friend us on Facebook at HeyGirlPod, or even better, join our brand new Patreon to get bonus materials, hang with my mom, and you get to help Hey Girl continue to grow and reach more people. That's pretty cool. All right, time to grab that seltzer and maybe a tissue box just in case. Here's my mom.
Hey listeners, and welcome back to another week of the Hey Girl podcast. This week, I get to introduce you to the one and only Vicki Gray. Y'all, I loved this interview so much. I am so pumped for it to come out because I know it's going to mean so much to all of you who get to hear Vicki's story. But before we get to it, a couple of things. If you have been loving what you're hearing on Hey Girl, maybe in some small or big way, God's used this podcast as an encouragement to you, I've got 3 ways that you can help support what we're doing here. First is leaving a review. You leave us a 5-star review, maybe include in there some of your favorite things about the podcast, and those few moments invested help this podcast reach more people. I don't know how it works. I just know that that is how it works. 2, share us with your people. Y'all, if there's a specific episode or you're just like, I just want to tell people about Hey Girl, go ahead and put it out there. Your social media, word of mouth. If it's on your social media, be sure to tag us because all of those things, they just make us smile and are such an encouragement. And 3, join our Patreon, y'all. If you go to my website, bethanyneedham.com, you'll find a link to go over to Patreon. Whether you decide to join our Hey Girl Nation tier for just $5 a month, or you're like, y'all, I am joining the Superfans, the Hey Girl Squad, $20 a month. Either one of these are such a huge help and support to what we're doing because honestly, podcasts are weird. They're not free to do, even though they're free to listen to. Once again, I don't totally know how that works, but I know that being part of our Patreon helps support us financially so we can keep going with this, but also just encourages us to know that we have people out there who are listening, who are just there supporting, cheering us on. We love it. It means a lot. So again, leave us a review if you haven't already. Share us with your people and join our Patreon. Thank you so much for listening. Well, right this moment, because honestly, more than anything that you do, taking the time to download and listen to these episodes is the greatest support of all, because it means that I'm not just sitting here talking to myself in an empty room. We love you all. We love running our race next to each one of you, even those maybe we've never met face to face. But without further ado, y'all, this episode is amazing. Vicki Gray, I really hope that someday I get to meet her face to face because in the little time that I got to spend with her doing this interview, I just immediately felt this friendship. And I just appreciate people who you just feel relaxed with right away. And man, did we have some good laughs and great conversation. And I know that it's going to mean a lot to every one of you. So sit back, grab your seltzer or your favorite beverage, maybe a cozy blanket, and enjoy this story from Vicki Gray. All right, listeners, I am so excited to be sitting here with a brand new person to me, a new friend, Vicki Gray. Vicki, welcome to the Hey Girl podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I'm excited to have you. So you were brought to me through recommendation. It was kind of a fun one because it was a girlfriend that recommended you. And I was talking to my husband about like, oh, I have interviews. I'm interviewing this person. And again, I didn't know really any of your story, but he's like, wait a second. I think I know her husband or like knew of her husband. And so it was this really small world where he's like, oh yeah, he has a podcast. And so it was just very rarely when I say a name does he necessarily have any connection. So when football and then podcast, it just everything
When
clicked.
those worlds collide.
Yes,
Yes.
it all came together. So I'm excited today to hear your story and just get the chance to talk to you. I looked up a little, usually, like my team sent me some information. And just from the little bit I saw, I just had this vibe of like, I really feel like I could be friends with this lady. Like, she's a lot of fun. I like that.
Well, now that I found out you played tackle football, we can definitely be friends, Bethany.
Yes, you are on my team.
Yay.
Oh, well, Vicky, for those who maybe don't know you or have never had the opportunity to meet you, why don't you just take some time and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Vicky Gray. My husband is Derwin Gray, and I'm actually going to share a little bit of our story because that will help you know me a little bit more. We have two children. We have a 24-year-old daughter and a 20-year-old son, and they're both in college right now, although one lives with us and is doing completely online. We've been married. We are coming up on, good gracious, 28 years this May.
Wow.
Yes. Thank
Congratulations.
you. And so I'm sure when you're looking at me, you're thinking, wow, you must have been like 15 when you got married. No.
I did have that thought, not gonna lie.
No, I always like to say that because I'm like 28 years. Like, is that even possible? So a little bit about our story though. I was born and raised in Montana, Western Montana, actually, and spent a lot of time in the Northwest in Portland, Oregon, and in near Missoula, Montana. That's pretty much my life until I went to college. I basically was born and raised in a family that I would say probably would have said we were Christians, but it would have been because we weren't anything other than Christian, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yep.
We American, not Buddhist, not Hindu, not Jewish, and so therefore by default. But didn't go to church growing up. My parents divorced when I was young. They both remarried shortly after that. When my dad remarried, he married a woman who was from the LDS church, which is the Mormon church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they call themselves. So early on, I was exposed to the Mormons. Fast forward, I'm just going to skip over basically my entire middle school, high school, etc. I was the ultimate overachiever, valedictorian, all state in 3 sports, state champion in the javelin. I was a javelin thrower, believe it or not.
Yes.
Yeah. So see, we have this tough thing going on, right? And so basically, I would say achievement was my God. I very much I had this drive. And while achieving is a strength, I used it it became my God. I mean, that was where I found my purpose. That's where I found my value. That's where I found my acceptance, right? Is that a girl, developed, there was perfectionism, all that stuff went into that. So, but the reason I brought that up with the Mormonism is I got recruited by BYU. My sister became Mormon also, and she went to BYU. They offered me the best scholarship that I could get, a Division I school. I was recruited by some smaller schools to play like basketball and volleyball, but growing up in a small town in Montana, I was like, yeah, no, I'm going big. Go big or go home. That's kind of been my thing. Went to BYU, and it was definitely a culture shock, and really struggled my first couple of years there because all of a sudden you go from a town that has less than 30,000 people to a school that has 30,000 people. Okay. And didn't really fit in because I wasn't Mormon, was pretty much lost basically. Well, 2 years into my life at Brigham Young University, I met my husband. So my husband was from the inner city of San Antonio, Texas, and he got recruited by BYU to play football. And so he wasn't Mormon either. And so you have two non-Mormons that meet at a Mormon school that literally, I believe it's 98% Mormon. And so the fact that we met, we actually got married in college, if you can believe that. I mean, we were just like inseparable, basically. So we get married in college. He gets drafted to play in the NFL, and we move to Indianapolis. So he plays for the Indianapolis Colts for 5 years. And it was in Indianapolis that we both came to faith in Christ. And a big crucial part of our story is he had a teammate. It's a very funny story, and I think it can be found on our church website that I'll get to in a second, but they called him the naked preacher. But the naked preacher would go around telling people about Jesus in the locker room. So he had a teammate telling him about Jesus. At the same time, I was working in a health clinic in the inner city of Indianapolis, and there was a dietitian that I was working with who I just knew there was something different about her. I wouldn't have known what it was other than I used to tell my husband, there's this lady at work and she's a really good Christian. And I would say she doesn't cuss like I do. She doesn't party like we do. You know, I mean, like she lived a moral life, let's put it that way. But I noticed more than that, really. I noticed there was just a kindness. There was a gentleness. It was the fruit of the Spirit. It was the Holy Spirit drawing me in. At that time, I didn't know. She knew that I was seeking, and she began to share Christ with me. And so this is happening for both of us simultaneously.
Wow.
And at the same time, I'm kind of feeling like I've peaked out in some ways. Like I'm like, okay, I've kind of achieved everything I want to achieve, and this is it. And my husband was the same way. Like the NFL was nothing like college. Like we had so much more fun in college. After his first year, we were like, can we go back to college? It was really hard. I mean, you literally are going into a business. It's not like a fun game anymore at that point. I like to say God set us up. I think he let us achieve all these things we thought would like fulfill our dreams and make us so happy. And at the end of the day, we were empty. We were like, this is it. Like there has to be more to life. So around 1997, I came to faith about 6 months before he did. And at this point, we weren't even going to a church, really. I used to kind of step in the back of a Presbyterian church when I was by myself. Didn't want to be talked to, didn't want anybody to sit by me. You know, I would just kind of sit in there and sneak in. And so had an experience there. And then the team chaplain started pouring into us at that point. So we come to faith in Indianapolis. And at that point, he starts getting hurt. One injury after another. And we're like, okay, now what, right? Well, after 5 years, the Indianapolis Colts, they had a different coach come in, and we were there for 1 year. And then they called and said, you know, we're not going to resign you. Thank you. Click. That's it. So, you know, you own a house there. We had a baby there. Like this is kind of our life. And so he got signed by the Carolina Panthers. And we thought, Carolina, like what? I mean, him being from Texas, me being from Montana, and then us living in Utah, we always thought we would live like either Southern California or Arizona. We were definitely like Western type people. And we were like, Charlotte, North Carolina, like, where is that even? And so, but at this point, this was the only quote unquote job offer we had. So we move ourselves to Charlotte, North Carolina. And he actually, super long story short, I'll just say he played 1 year here with the Panthers, but he will say, even at that point, he was realizing his passion for football was gone. Like he was growing like crazy. He only wanted to read the Bible, and he'd had enough of the injuries. I mean, it was just like, I'm just done with this. So, and then we got our first experience at a Bible teaching, somewhat contemporary church that people were so real and so genuine. And my word, everybody could sing. And we'd never heard music like that. We'd never heard teaching like that. And so we fell in love and at this church with the people, with that body. And I like to say that's where we grew up spiritually. Like God planted us with strong leaders. And before you knew it, we were like leading Bible studies, leading Wednesday night groups. My husband started preaching for our senior pastor. And it was clear that God was doing something, right? And we were both just so hungry. Well, we started a nonprofit ministry at that point because we were really trying to decide what God wanted us to do. We started that in 99. And then my husband was getting his master's degree in seminary. And he started to believe that God was calling him to be a pastor. Well, at this point, I was like, I don't even really know what that means. And I certainly don't know what being a pastor's wife means. And so I'm not sure how this is going to go, but he was patient. And about 6 months of praying together, I was like, okay, I think you're right. I think this is what we're supposed to do. So he became a pastor and we planted a church with 2 other pastors. And that was a great learning opportunity. And through a series of events, us and one of the other pastors decided to kind of multiply out and go to different areas of the city. And so that was 11 years ago. We planted Transformation Church, and we are in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. We're just south. We're actually in South Carolina, but we're 15 minutes from Charlotte. And a big part, and I haven't even said this part of the story, but my husband is Black and I'm white. So for those of you that are listening and you can't see, so we had a multi-ethnic relationship. And when we became Christians, we started to notice that every event we would go to or every church we would go to was segregated. And we couldn't understand that because we were both athletes and we had been in very diverse settings, like our entire, even we went to the nightclub, it was diverse, right? And so, but church and my work, where I worked in Indianapolis was diverse. And so we couldn't understand that. And the answers that people would give us, they weren't very good answers, like we were like, but where does it say that in the Bible? Like, help us see what the Bible says about that. And so after a while, the Lord was basically impressing upon both of us, like, don't criticize, create. And so when we planted Transformation Church, our vision is we exist to be a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, mission-shaped community that loves God completely upward, ourselves correctly inward, and our neighbors compassionately outward. And we literally live by that vision. I mean, it's straight out of Jesus' mouth. It's made out of the Great Commission and the Great Commandment. And so for us, it couldn't be any better. Planting Transformation Church was probably one of the hardest things that we ever did, but God has been incredibly faithful. We were on the fastest growing churches in America list for a couple years. We really are intentionally multi-ethnic. We have probably around 50 people on our leadership team now on our staff. And with COVID and going online, that has just actually exploded. I think this past Sunday we had 28 people give their lives to Jesus. So, I mean, God is just multiplying and we are just trying to steward all the things. Let's see. So I'm on our executive team and I do directional strategy and I help lead our women. I do like all the things, but I love what I get to do. I think that's probably a good to give you an idea of where to start.
Oh my goodness. So many parts of your story I appreciate. I actually love when I come into an interview and I don't know all the details because I feel like I'm getting the listener experience of just like eating it all up. But one of the things I think I just appreciated listening, especially to the beginning of your story and with your husband, and maybe it's just something as a good reminder to me as a believer, but people who were influencing your life at different parts. And like, as God was really, as you said, like he was drawing you to himself. And how often we just don't know. We don't know how just living out the fruit of the spirit, like you described this woman who just something about her and how that drew you. And I love the naked preacher that.
Oh, it is the most amazing story. Like, and to hear him tell it, I mean, it will have you in stitches. And that's really where the mission shaped part of our vision comes from, is that we believe we are shaped by Jesus' mission to seek and save the lost.
Mm,
And so therefore, every Christ follower is a royal priest. And we're passionate about people being equipped to like go where you go.
yeah.
Like, just go where God has planted you and be Jesus to the people around you. Like, you don't
Mm,
have to like stand on your desk and beat your Bible, like
yeah.
just love the people and
Mm,
do it right where God has planted you. And the more you fall in love with him and he transforms your heart, then the more people see that in you. Right. And
yeah.
so I think for us coming out of an unchurched, both of us coming out of unchurched backgrounds, we recognize that there are going to be people that will never step foot into a church,
Mm,
and that this person at Starbucks or at the gym or at the school or whatever might be the only Christian they ever come in contact with.
mm,
And so what greater adventure is there than to be on mission with the King of the universe, right? And that
mm.
he uses each one of us for his purposes, but just the way we're wired, like he didn't make mistakes when he made us.
Hmm.
And so like you and I clearly have this like intense streak, right? You like football, I like
Yes.
football, I do the javelin. And this intensity that he's given me has made me so like zealous and
Mm,
passionate to reach people for him. And so even a little example like that, I just love that he has given us those little nuances in our personality to use us where he puts us.
mm. I just had a conversation with a woman yesterday, and she was asking what I was doing for work. And I was telling her that it's been such a strange season with, COVID, at least the lockdown in our state shut down what I had been doing for work. And my kids' school, they contacted me with this. They're like, we are about to lose our lunch lady. Like, she has a family emergency. She has to leave. And my initial thought was like, why would I go be a lunch lady at my kid's school? But I won't go through the whole story, but it was very clear that this was a God thing.
Saying,
And
yes, you are
so,
going to be the lunch lady.
but her and I were talking. It was funny hearing her even give this perspective of, she's like, think about all of the people who, even like Christian ministries, who are fighting to get inside of the schools to have influence in these kids' life. And she's like, and you're smack in the middle of this school surrounded by, and the school is a pre-K all the way up through high school. And I see them all at like different, she was like, if that's not a God thing. And it was just this kind of perspective shift, just like you said. We have a friend who says it like, if you're asking yourself, like, what is my mission field? And he's like, just look at the space between your feet. Like, that is
Oh,
your
so
mission
good.
field. And so I think about that in this kind of lunch lady role is, God, it may be something I never would have pieced together, but here is my mission field with these students.
Yes.
And what better way to earn the trust and love of middle school and high schoolers than to feed them?
Yeah, that's right. It's so true. If you're a parent, you know this.
Oh, yeah, the connection of food and again, it's not for me, it's not that I get to sit there and preach sermons but it's in the little ways of like, hey, this, sometimes giving a free lunch to a kid, you know what? Don't worry about it.
Right.
Here you go, or whatever, the quick conversations. So I love that.
That's right.
I appreciate, as you were saying, and I think you described it, you guys, the achiever mentality of getting to that place where you feel like, okay, I've achieved. And even you mentioned your husband's story. I can imagine, all of us have that, what seems like kind of a crazy dream. And I would say playing for the NFL is like one of
Yeah.
those people joke like, well, we're never going to play for the NFL, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
And to hear it from the inside, someone saying like, but this itself was not fulfilling. Like this wasn't, I loved your sharing that because I think of two groups of people. There's the ones who are exactly where you described, where they've achieved. And now they're sitting there asking themselves like, okay, this was not as satisfying. But then there's the other group that still is living that lie that if I could just achieve, then I would feel satisfied. And I appreciate so much that part of your story that you got to that place and you're like, this doesn't, I'm wondering, like you talked about obviously coming to faith in different things, but looking at your life now versus then, what are some of the like that you just feel like this is so much more fulfilling than where we were before?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, just kind of an obvious example is so we co-lead our team at Transformation Church, our staff. And so we have close to 50 people, right? There's like, I don't know, 48 on an active roster for football. And this team is like, I love nothing more than seeing them come alive in who God has made them to be and in fulfilling, like seeing God's purposes being fulfilled in their lives and us getting to be a part of that. And then them being used by God to reach other people. I'm like, it's so much more fulfilling than being on a team, quote unquote team, where, I mean, I'll tell you this story. When my husband was a rookie at the Colts, he said one or two of the players in training camp told him the wrong place. So you're fighting for a job in training camp. And if you don't know the plays, you're not going to make the team, right? And I mean, it's very cutthroat. So that's an example of, well, can you even trust your teammates, right? Yeah. And so we know how important trust is in just, say, a family or like a marital relationship, right? And so having a level of community around us that is unconditionally loving, unconditionally supportive, that it's not based on our performance, right? It's not based on, well, how many interceptions did my husband get this week? Did they win or did they lose? And with the wives, I mean, thankfully I had one especially good friend who was very level-headed, but with some of the wives or girlfriends, it was very much like who's wearing what, who's, the most beautiful, who's this. And it's like, that's a competition you can never win anyways, right? Especially when you round out about 50, you really figure that out. There's no winning that competition. And so, but it's exhausting, right? Yeah. I mean, I would say right now, like we look at each other at times and go, can you believe you played in the NFL? Like we literally will be watching a game going, this is unbelievable. And the older we get, the more amazed we are by it. And at the same time, it feels like it's a whole different world. And we're super grateful. It gave us a platform. Like one of the reasons people even wanted him to come speak is because he was a football player. And so that is a God-given platform that we have to steward, have to take care of. And the other thing that I think has helped is, especially since we're in the Southeast, the Bible Belt, and not only the Bible Belt, but we're in the Charlotte area where you have a little bit of a history, right? Which is before our time, but of like TV evangelists and stuff that have kind of gone astray. And so there's a lack of trust for spiritual leaders. And we've had several people kind of say to us, well, what has increased our trust is you guys have already achieved all that. Like you aren't in it to earn money. You aren't in it to be well-known. Like you're not going to be more well-known doing this than you were playing football. That has actually, God has used that in that way too, to build trust with other people. So it's totally different. We don't miss it at all. I can just tell you right now, we don't miss it at all.
Oh, that's so funny. You know, my husband used to tour with a band. He was a musician full time. And what you're describing is kind of how we feel when I was like, remember like when you toured and that was our life? It feels like a totally different chapter, which is crazy.
Yes. Yes.
You describing like the culture with the wives, I can't even, it makes sense, but it's hard to imagine. Of course, meanwhile, I'm thinking like, guys, just give Giselle the trophy every time and walk away.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thankful I wasn't on that team.
Like, I'm not even competing here. Like,
yeah.
Win.
She's a supermodel. She wins.
Yeah. Every time. It's fine.
Oh, that's too funny.
So I appreciate that you brought up just being in this, you're a white woman married to a Black man, and it is no secret that not that we have new issues with racism, but that, and I know different people feel differently. I kind of just personally have this sense that what COVID did was slow everybody down enough to actually see what's been here all along. Like we are seeing things that we didn't see before. It's been scary and heartbreaking and just so many things. And I know for those of us who, like, I speak obviously just as a white woman, sometimes not even knowing what to say, just wanting to cry with brothers and sisters. And I am like the fierceness in me tends to come out in defensive and advocacy, where I was like, that's it.
Yeah. Yes.
As that's when javelin throwing would really come in handy.
That's exactly right. I should have some extras around.
But I just think you have a very unique seat. And I love how you've described like a unique platform, this space that you steward of being married to a Black man. You have children together. What has this journey looked like for you? And maybe are there any words that you would share? I'm assuming with the number of people that listen, we probably have wives who are in similar, like they're married to Black men or vice versa. We have women who are married to white men and trying to, how do you walk through this together in such an intimate relationship?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we met in Utah and got married in Utah, the only real pushback that we got was part of my family, not even all of my family, just part of my family really struggled with it. And that was a very hard time. It was a very hard time. I will say the more I grew to understood the ones that struggled with it, what they came out of, I was able to give grace and extend compassion. But I'm very much like you, that fierce, like the righteous indignation of just how wrong it is. And you got to remember, like, I grew up in Montana, like there's 6 Indian reservations in Montana. And so then that undergirds some of my story too. And so I've always had this just internal sense of right and wrong, of justice, of, it doesn't mean I did right, but I always had this, like, that is so wrong. Like, that is not okay, So it was hard early on. And at that point though, I knew what I was supposed to be doing. I mean, I can't even say God, I knew God wanted me to, because I didn't know God at that point, but I just knew this is what we were supposed to do. And the good thing was, is in Utah, he was so well known at BYU as a football player. I was well known as a track athlete. People loved us. And so we really didn't experience many problems there. Now, when we moved to Indianapolis, I'm going to tell you what, homegirl had her world rocked. Okay. Like, I was so unaware. I remember sitting in the kitchen of our apartment, and okay, these are still the days where we read newspapers. Okay. If that tells you anything. So this was like 1994, I believe. And it had like a little clip that at this little town right outside of Indianapolis, they were holding a KKK rally. And I was like, what? This still exists? I mean, I was floored. And I literally called my sister, who was still living in Utah. And I'm like, you're not going to believe this one. And so I will say, definitely experienced more racism in Indianapolis than we did in Utah. And now that I've learned more history, I understand it. Not that I okay it at all. Some of the worst racism that we actually experienced on the team was his Black teammates not being accepting of me being white. And that was also different for us because it had always been the opposite, right? And so I do see one way how God used that, and then I'll continue on with that story, is we were very young. I mean, I think he was 21 and I was 22. And here we were kind of like alone in the world. And I feel like that made us grow closer together, and we grew stronger because it was kind of like us against the world, right? So that was tough in Indianapolis. Now, when we moved to Charlotte, we didn't notice it as much, but people would say, well, honey, that's because it's the South. They're not going to tell you like they will other places. And I was like, are you serious? So, I will say, had more experiences where, like, let's just say I'd be at the store with my kids, and people would go, are those your kids? Or they would say something like that. And I'd be like, yeah. Or my kids, as they got older, would be like, they just asked if you're my mom. And, after a while, you just learn to like roll with it, but I will say, I think you have to have a thick skin, obviously, and you have to raise your children to be so confident in who they are, and that they're not a mistake, that their beautiful, hello, perfect skin that I would give anything for is not a mistake.
Preach.
Perfect hair. I mean, my daughter's hair has like these perfect curls, I used to get big permanents in the 80s to have those curls, and had my white girl afro. But I think that God has allowed us to go through all those things again to be able to navigate the spaces that we're in, and very well aware of a Black person and a white person can speak to things differently, right? And so we try to be very careful about how we're sharing the things that we're sharing. And we are, man, it is a rough time right now, right? It is rough. Even though the percentage of minorities is increasing, people of color, the percentage of mixed marriages is increasing. And so these are all the realities of what we're experiencing. And it's funny you would say that. We have a gentleman who is on our teaching team. He's not on our staff. He's actually on the staff of Proverbs 31. And he's Indian, like Asian Indian, and his wife is white. And she actually started like a little business kind of group thing where she works with people who are in mixed marriages, kind of help them like navigate, like, how does this work? It's really funny. She has like hysterical videos on Instagram, but I think there's a market for it.
Yeah, for real. And I mean, you think about just marriages in general, you're bringing two families together. So but then when you add to it a culture dynamic like this, even more than just skin color, I mean, just culture and how I find it really interesting, even how you said that a white person and a Black person can be saying the same thing different ways. And I think there is waters to navigate, but I also love, and I appreciate that perspective. And I think it's important that those are the things that do make you stronger. They're the things that can really strengthen your marriage and your kids. And it's its own unique platform to speak into things that, like, for you to speak into things is even like has a different voice than even me coming from, New Hampshire with the whitest, palest children you have ever seen, practically albino. So I just think there's a beauty in that. And I'm one, like you, again, I see these, the children from mixed, and I actually think that mixed marriages, I think there's just something so beautiful about that, because to me, it's just another picture of God's kingdom and just the beauty
Yes.
of that he's created in all different colors and cultures. And yeah,
Yes.
I'm a big
Yes.
fan.
Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, and I can even see, my husband being the lead pastor of our church and being Black in the South. It's really actually amazing. He's the lead pastor of a multi-ethnic church in South Carolina that is probably, now it is hard to tell because we haven't met in person, right, since March, but we usually are around 60% white, 40% non-white.
Mm.
And historically, it hasn't even been that long ago that a mixed marriage was even allowed in South Carolina, let alone leading a church, And
Wow.
so one of the things that we will say is him leaving the inner city of San Antonio, Texas, which, by the way, his high school was also incredibly diverse. Like, he played football with white, Black, Latino, like for him, he was just used to that.
Mhm.
There was an Army base nearby or an Air Force base. Then going to BYU, and there's diversity there. Now, the diversity there, it is mostly white, but then they have a huge Polynesian population, and then you have few African Americans. And so he's learned how to communicate to different populations just by way of where God has placed him in his life, and same with me. And so we don't take that lightly, and we know that that is a gift to be, to handle very carefully. And
Mm.
he writes books. I don't write, at least not this stage in my life, but he does write books, and he's just started. He has a book coming out in April about it's about the multi-ethnic church. Then
Mhm.
he's going to have a book coming out next year called It's Not Black or White, and which is going to be more of like a lay level, like
Mm.
racial reconciliation type book. So, but he's also written a couple other books too.
Did he write, is it The Good Life? I'm looking behind you. There's
Yes,
I
he
was like,
did.
there's
Yep.
multiple The Good Life
Yeah, there's
books.
a bunch of them just positioned just so you can see them.
I
Yes,
It's like either
that
he
came
wrote it or
out.
you're obsessed with that
Yes,
author.
yes, yes. I know. Every time I come in, I'm like, oh, there's more. He released The Good Life in June and did a Bible study. And I think there's even on the U version, they actually have a devotional, The Good Life devotional.
Oh, I'll have to look that up.
It's really an incredible book. Basically, it's on the Beatitudes, and it's basically like, this is what kingdom living looks like, and the good life isn't getting everything you want. The good life is us being everything Jesus wants us to be.
Mm.
It's becoming who he wants us to be.
I love it. And I love the color. The cover is so happy.
I know, isn't it?
So one of the things we say on Hey Girl a lot is, that our mission, I guess, is encouraging women or all listeners, guys, girls, to run their race in their place. And this idea of being faithful, kind of what we were talking about, exactly where God's placed you. So we've talked a lot about your story. I'm wondering, as we get ready to close, if you could just give us a picture, what does this season right now, obviously doing church ministry, like a picture of a day in the life of Vicki Gray, what does faithfulness look like for you right now?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I did start graduate school last fall. So I
Nice.
am only taking one class at a time right now because I do work full time. And so you know how that is. You're just like, how do I juggle all this? And my goal isn't to just hurry up and get a degree. My goal really is to learn, right? To be more
Right.
equipped to do the role I'm in. So today I got up and had my time. Like, I like to read my Bible and journal and pray. I try to do it every day of the week. Sometimes we're doing good to get it 4 days that I'm like, okay, nobody interrupted me today, right? But then I read a few chapters in a book for school, and I started to outline a paper that I need to write for school. Then I'm actually teaching with my husband this weekend in our Sunday service because we're talking about workaholism And that is one of my greatest struggles. And so, so he teed me up to help with that one. So then I worked on that message, and I've gone to three different meetings. They're all Zoom meetings right now.
Yep.
With our staff. My son is in Montana, going to the University of Montana, and he's dealing with some living situation changes. So I've been on the phone with him 3 times today. My daughter is here, and she and I talk in between meetings, and she's got Zoom meetings. And then my husband's actually currently in Chicago, where he's doing some stuff for Willow Creek this week. So let's see, what else has happened today? Oh, the cats are fighting.
Oh no.
Just trying to keep it real,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking about maybe we should do pizza for dinner.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I also had to say one of the things you included your kids in this, and I think this is so good for moms to hear, because we have a lot of moms of young, like littles, that listen, and
Yes.
I call mine mediums. They're not little because mine are 15 and he'll be 17 in a couple of weeks. But the one thing that I always try, or that has been the biggest lesson for me, is that mothering, that ministry is ongoing. I'm very glad I had a mentor tell me this early on, that just when you think they're going to need you less, prepare yourself, because they're going to need you more.
Yes.
And that has been
Yes.
so true from like middle school into high school, where I was like, okay, I really thought we'd be moving, and it's a different kind of need. It's not a mommy wipe my butt need, but
That's right. That's right. And it's harder when the weight is on your heart versus sitting on your lap, right?
Yes.
It's like this intangible, it's just different. And I do think there's definitely something to be said for managing expectations, right? And especially, I mean, my goodness, life was already changing anyways, as the age of emancipation has gone up, but then you add COVID in. I mean, it's like, I feel like we can just throw all that to the wind right now. And I think everybody's just doing their best to survive,
Yeah.
I will say this, I don't know, do you do the Enneagram or anything like that? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not very versed in it, but there's a few girls on our staff that love it. And I found out that I'm an Enneagram 1, which means I like to fix things. I like things to be a certain way. And one of the things that I have realized is managing expectations. And instead of trying to feel like I need to make what it should be, just take what comes in the day. And I have to tell myself that a lot, because my wiring is, well, we should be doing this, and it could be better like this, and that could be done. And instead, then I end up stressed out and frustrated and disappointed, right? And so now I'm like, okay, Lord, it's your day. And whatever you want to get done, you're going to have to do it through me, because clearly I am out of control.
Yes. I am a 7 Enneagram, which is called the enthusiast, but 7s, I feel like there's some connection between
There
1s
is.
and 7s, but I have
a healthy 1, it goes to 7.
Goes to a 7, right? Yes.
So I like to have fun when I'm in a good place.
I could tell that about you.
That
That's
is our connection.
See? Well, Vicki, this has been wonderful. It's been so nice to meet you and hear your story. I'm excited for our listeners to, I feel like, because we have a lot of Northeast, you are going to be new to some of these women. I think it's awesome. If they wanted to connect with you or kind of see more of what you're up to, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so you can just go to our church website if you want. That's Transformation Church, all spelled out, and it's .tc, like Transformation Church. And so it is a little bit of a different,
Gotcha.
I am on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. My Instagram is just at Vicki Gray, VICKIGRAY. Pretty simple. You can tell I was an early person that one was even available, but I'm not huge on social media, but I usually do try to answer messages and stuff. So, but yeah, you can reach me via email through our website and when you go to our team page. But yeah, thank you for having me. And it is fun to make a new friend and a friend in the Northeast. I don't know that many people in the Northeast.
Well, girl, if you are ever visiting and you want to come get the New Hampshire experience, absolutely. I will set up the guest room and we'll do it big. I'll make a javelin and put it in there just so you feel right.
We can go out and throw the football around, you know.
Yes. If you guys stayed at our house and your husband didn't throw a football with my husband and son, I feel like I would have failed them.
Like, bring the football. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, well, thank you.
Oh, thank you. This has been awesome.